In Demon Souls, getting a boss weapon is not so simple. Unless you are making a spell, getting the boss's soul is not enough to make its weapon. First, you have to beat the Flame Lurker and give its soul to the Blacksmith and Stonefang Tunnel to even be able to transpose a boss soul. But before he can even make a boss weapon, you have to use a weapon of the same class to make it, and sometimes you'll have to upgrade it to +6, sometimes +7, and sometimes +8. It's pretty confusing. Most of us are familiar with this system because it was kept in Dark Souls, though it was streamlined to make it slightly less annoying. Yet this transposition system was completely abandoned by the time Dark Souls 2 came around, and never returned again, much to the relief of the player base. Thankfully, that's not the only way to get boss weapons in this challenge. There are 3 characteristics a boss weapon can have, and only one of these needs to be met at a time for a single weapon. Here are the 3 characteristics. First, it is transposed from a boss's soul, as I mentioned. Second, it is wielded by a boss, such as the Tower Shield wielded by Tower Knight that can be found in 1-3 and 4. And third, it is a unique weapon found in a boss arena that is tied to the boss in some way. As far as I know, this only applies to the Dragon Bone Smasher in the Dragon God arena, and the Storm Ruler in the Storm King arena, so those 2 weapons could be used according to the rules. However, something like the Baby's Nail in the Fool's Idol arena doesn't count for the challenge. While it could be related to the boss, it isn't really unique since it can be acquired from somewhere else. I'm sure you figured this would be the case, but I will be using the duplication glitch so that I can make multiple weapons from each boss soul without having to do extra playthroughs. Lastly, I have one self-imposed rule, and that is that I can only use each boss weapon for one boss. But after that, I can still use it for one mini-boss as well as for regular enemies in the world if I wish. And that's it. That's all the rules. Pretty simple, right? So let's get right into it. For the first level, we're gonna let our fists do all the talking. After all, it's not possible to get a boss weapon even if we wanted to, unless we were in NG+. But it's more challenging this way anyway. I mentioned this last time I played Demon Souls, but fists aren't as bad in this game as they are in the others, especially considering that there's no poise. They are actually a kind of reliable weapon against regular enemies in the early levels. 1-1 is the only level where I'll be forced to use them for the area boss, since this part is very linear and the phalanx must be defeated for further game progression. Honestly, I wasn't really sure what to expect with this fight, since bosses in Demon Souls as a whole are very easy, but fists still do very little damage in boss fights. The phalanx is probably the worst possible tutorial boss to be stuck with just your fists, because of the 30+ hoplites spawned in with it. This normally isn't even noticeable because of how pathetic this boss is against firebombs or any other weapon, but when damage is very low, you come to realize that you have to actually take them out one at a time so they don't reattach and heal the boss. I gravely underestimated the amount of healing grass I would need and ran out on the first attempt, and then chickened out because I didn't want a death to this on record. But be warned, everyone's fraud will catch up to them sooner or later. Only when you fought this thing with fists do you realize just how many of those little things it spawns in. I didn't think I would ever be able to see the end of it. While they can respawn, it will be in small amounts, so as long as you take enough of them out, this really won't be an issue as long as the phalanx's body is mostly exposed. I took almost 30 minutes on this, which, based on prior attempts, was actually making good time, as terrible as it sounds. The last hit marks the end of the worst part of the playthrough, and the tedium was finally over. However, I always love the sense of accomplishment that comes with something like this, and this time, I truly felt like I earned the reward of being able to level my character. Now that the rest of the archstones are unlocked, let's go to the Tower of Latria to get the first boss weapon. Here, we can find the claws in one of the cells, which are wielded by the old monk, and thus count as a boss weapon. And hey, while I'm here, I might as well get most of the level out of the way before leaving. freeing the Freaky Sage is going to be the most important step, as he's the only person who can transpose boss souls that isn't locked behind a boss. The last step to make our claws as close to the ones used by the boss as possible is to head down to the Valley of Defilement to pick up some Sucker Stone from the Leechmonger's arena. After this, we can freely explore 2-1 as we make our way to the boss, getting our claws to +3 in the process, so Ed can infuse them with tearing. While we have the factor of authenticity down, we don't exactly have the viability one. The tearing infusion sacrifices a lot of damage in exchange for bleed buildup, and it turns out Armor Spider is immune to bleed, so all we really did was downgrade our claws. It is possible to skip this boss, but I didn't really feel a need to do that here since I had a weapon. However, I did try to squeeze behind it anyway, and we all know where cutting corners gets you. The good news is, there isn't anything particularly challenging about this boss, and I found out that if you are wearing the Thief's Ring, it doesn't even attack when you stand at the Fog Gate, so it's much easier to return to the fight after the big fire blast. With that done, now would be a good time to get some more health. Freaky Sage will make our first boss soul weapon of the run. In this case, it's the Fire Spray spell, basically the same thing as Fire Surge in Dark Souls. We're gonna go back to 3-1 and try this against the Fool's Idol. It's not the worst or the best spell out there, but it's very MP efficient and worked great against a passive boss like her. As usual, we'll get some levels into the important stuff. Then, speak with the Freak, again, to make Soul Ray out of her soul. So far, all is going well, and we have a competent spell to use against Flamelurker. To make up for his extreme fire resistance, he has an extreme magic weakness, which we can fully exploit with Soul Ray no matter how low our magic stats are. And just in case things get rough, we can always hide behind the bones to heal, before going back out to spam our spells. Flamelurker is usually the only boss, besides the Maneaters, that gives me trouble on a melee build, but with spells, he's as easy as everyone else, and goes down without much of a fight. We can get quite a few levels after that, and give Ed his soul, so that we can continue to progress in the run. The first weapon we'll make with him is the Scraping Spear from the Phalanx Soul. After getting the 15 dexterity we need to use it, we can head back to 5-1 since we've already cleared it and gotten the shortcuts out of the way. This area is much less painful when you have spells. In normal playthroughs, I always take them with me here. But anyways, now that we have a new weapon, we're gonna actually fight the Leechmonger this time. This guy likes to thrash around, but as long as you don't back down, you'll be able to finish it in under a minute with almost any weapon. On this particular playthrough, Leechmonger didn't even try to heal. I guess it really has resigned to its fate as time passed. I decided to level Faith for a miracle slot, then carried on through the Poison Swamp until I reached the bridge shortcut. To make the next boss weapon, we're gonna backtrack to 1-2 for the Compound Bow, then go to Ed to transpose it into the Lava Bow. This bow is perfect for the Dirty Colossus since it has innate fire damage, and if you camp behind this brazier, you can avoid his attacks 90% of the time. Probably 100% if you stand in the right spot. If you get hit, walk into the brazier to burn the flies, then safely resume your archery. After that, we'll claim some free levels, which I put into strength this time because I have a plan. We can cheese this Vanguard with the Lava Bow as well, and pick up the Grey Demon's soul, then finish getting our strength to 20. I used the Dirty Colossus's soul for the occasion, since you can't make any PvE weapons with it. There were plenty of souls left over, so I used them to work on magic and faith for future weapon stat requirements. Now, the time has come for me to reunite with my beloved, the Dozer Axe. We'll use this to clear out the remaining part of Latria, since this thing plows through everything the game throws at us with ease. Hopefully, even the man-eater itself. After laughing at the pathetic brain thing while it tries to cling on to life, the path will be cleared and we can test it out. This time I decided to use the classic thief's ring trick to fight them one-on-one. Surprisingly, black turpentine works on the Dozerax, which can result in some crazy damage output. Usually I could finish off the first one pretty easily, but without any armor I could get trapped by the pounces, so I can't get too confident just because I have my fancy axe. I got some pretty good RNG on this attempt, with the last man-eater being stuck in a shockwave attack loop, which missed me every time due to the terrain, and resulted in some free hits. By the time he got out of the loop, he was practically dead, and though my buff had worn off, my damage didn't suffer much. I may have been taking a risk fighting him on the bridge, but all's well that ends well. I level my faith some before meeting up with the blacksmith to trade for the Needle of Eternal Agony because my options are limited. Despite this thing being the worst weapon of all time, the stat requirements are very high, so I started eating my stock of souls to reach that steep dex and magic requirement. Everything I had was not even close to enough, so at some point I just said, you know what, screw it, and used some duped boss souls to reach it. But really, I don't even know why I bothered. What difference could it really have made? I don't even think they were nice enough to give this thing scaling. With my needle, I decided to see how it would go if I injected it into Garl Vinland to heal his plague. Well, it didn't heal the agony I was plagued with. Yeah, I'm not gonna bother with the rat ring. There's nothing that can save this damage. To hell with that. Let's just do Dragon God. I used the needle on an NPC boss last time anyway, and I don't think I can take any more of that for a lifetime. Using it for a gimmick fight is a smarter idea anyway. The spears will take the brunt of the health bar, and we're just the cleanup crew. One thing I don't get is how it breaks the debris faster than fists, but does less damage than fists. I don't know what they use to calculate the hits on the debris. Like I said, when that's all done, the boss doesn't even do anything but a small fire breath attack, which embarrassingly hit me a couple times. There we have it, an archdemon down. That is pretty important for us, since there's a spell trainer in 1-3. I did come back to pick up the Dragon Bone Smasher, but I didn't ever use it in this run. I got distracted by other weapons. I went ahead and got Vitality to 20, and then leveled Intelligence to get another spell slot, because we'll need that to use the next boss spell, Fireball. This one sounds like it'll be fun, and I have a perfect target in mind to test it out. Under normal circumstances, the old monk is just a guy. He doesn't have anything in his kit that would cause me any problems. But he does have frame-perfect dodges, so I wasted a lot of spices on this. If you let him get close enough, he'll try to throw something out eventually, but don't let him scare you. Just keep throwing those fireballs, and you'll win. After my victory, I get some extra intelligence and endurance, then meet up with the usual people to get my weapons. First, I make Homing Soul Arrow, then I make the Insanity Catalyst. The Insanity Catalyst has a big MP penalty when you equip it in exchange for the high damage, but in Demon Souls, that doesn't really matter, since you can infinitely replenish it anyways. It's about time I challenge the Tower Knight. I'm more than halfway through the game at this point. I'm gonna use the Insanity Catalyst in tandem with Homing Soul Arrow for a fun little boss weapon combo. I figured out that it was actually better to whack the archers with the Catalyst than to try to get them with the spell in an enclosed space. So once the archers were more or less out of the way, all I had to do was simply aim towards the head, skipping the falling gimmick completely. One clean hit with this wipes out half of his health, which was cool to see, but it's not like I ever doubted the ability of the Insanity Catalyst in the first place. Occasionally it would miss, but I didn't really find it to be a big problem. I just had to position myself properly to avoid impact with his weapons. This spell is also very expensive, which is something to keep in mind when using it with the Insanity Catalyst. Chances are it will cost a whole MP bar, so you have to be prepared to eat some spices between hits. The Tower Knight falls, and we can proceed through the inner ward. There are a few things to check off the list in this level. One being to get rid of the fat officials to get the keys and the fashion. I also need to get the boss weapons lying around. First, we'll grab the penetrating sword in front of this wall. Before we worry about the next one, we'll take out the last fat official and free Bjorn just for the hell of it. Once the official is dead, we'll run to the end of the corridor to pick up the tower shield. The last thing on the list here is to go to this tower behind the locked door at the beginning of the level, while wearing our cool hat of course. Then the fat official will drop the stairs down for us so we can kill him and free Yuria, who will transpose souls into more advanced spells. We can make immediate use of her skills by making Ignite from the Armor Spider's soul and the one and only Firestorm from Dragon God. Some of her spells will take 3 slots, so let's get to leveling intelligence. Now that I have some weapon choices, I went to rematch Vinland with the penetrating sword. I don't know why he waited until now to talk to me, but good for him, I guess. I'm using the same strategy as last time. Basically, I block his path so he doesn't heal, and keep parrying him. Demon Souls doesn't let you two-hand and immediately take a riposte like Dark Souls does. The time window seems to be a lot less generous. Oh, but of course Garl Vinland gets a very generous backstabbing window. This was the only time I managed to successfully riposte after two-handing. It must have been something about the uneven terrain. Sometimes I would circle around for a backstab after parrying him just to get the damage. He might get a chance to run off, but you don't have to let him. When his health gets low, you can keep him occupied if you keep attacking. And that's that. I'm playing as a male character this time, so I actually get to use his armor. I think it's the best looking heavy armor in the game. That's why I dropped a lot of junk and equipped the Ring of Herculean Strength to pick it all up. But alas, I couldn't pick up Astraea. Since we're wearing this heavy armor, we might as well get some more endurance. Still, we're gonna have to take off a few pieces. I felt obliged to free the merchant, despite ignoring him for the rest of the level. After that was done, I proceeded through the level until I made it to the fog gate. For this one, we're gonna try out the tower shield just for fun. I'm gonna be stuck with a heavy roll no matter what, so let's just roll with it this time. This shield takes up a lot of stamina with each hit, but it still is able to rack up some decent damage with each fall. Wait, it actually hit me? You know what? Good for you, Adjudicator. I'm proud of you. Come on, that cleaver in the left hand can't just be for show, right? If I were an Adjudicator, that's the weapon I'd be using, especially considering that it's guarding the only weak spot on my body. Next time I play Demon Souls, I'm gonna try to get this thing to use its left hand. I just want to see the Adjudicator succeed for once in its life. We're gonna honor its legacy by making the Meat Cleaver, which we could use to slay the most powerful demon in the lands someday. But at the moment, we've just hit rock bottom. So let's take advantage of our situation and rescue Saint Urbain to access miracles from our boss souls. God's Wrath is the only offensive miracle in the game, and for this it comes at a steep price, taking 2 miracle slots to equip. 2 miracle slots that we don't have. So we're gonna go on a brief side quest to get another one. The first thing we need to do is retrieve the large Sword of Moonlight from the Slug Nest in 5-2, then trade it with Sparkly for the Ring of Devout Prayer, which can be worn for an extra miracle slot. I got a little too excited here and tried to test it in the Nexus. Let's just say that AoE was a little bigger than I expected. My bad, Ostrava. That's some useful info for the next fight, the old hero. Now I know that no matter how far away he gets during the cast, as long as I'm locked on, he'll get caught in the AoE. I don't know what happened in the Nexus. For some reason, I didn't get the right animation. But look at that animation. It's a very unique animation that we all know and love. It needs no introduction. This time, I didn't have the Thief's Ring, so I have to actually use my brain for this fight and avoid him after the screams. But he still will instantly lose track of the player after getting that one attack in. But I was in body form and sacrificed the cling ring to use the Ring of Sincere Prayer, so this guy got uncomfortably close to one-shotting me in some cases. Regardless, this fight was still very simple, and I had plenty of souls to work towards the faith requirement of the Meat Cleaver. As for the Storm King, of course I picked up the Storm Ruler, but I tried Ignite just in case it could maybe reach him, but that didn't work. I just wanted to be a little more original, but it's not like I really have a choice. Oh well, so much for that. At least all those souls will give us enough faith for the Meat Cleaver, plus an extra miracle slot that's completely useless now. The Meat Cleaver was probably my favorite boss weapon of the run. It has great range, amazing damage scaling, and it restores health on hit, a tradition for Souls Cleavers that continues to this day in Elden Ring. This should be a good choice against the Penetrator, and for backup, I've also equipped Ignite for a little fire damage if needed. But there's a problem. I completely forgot about Bjor. If you rescue him, he'll waltz into the fight and kind of just demolish this guy. I used Ignite to help Bjor out a little, and didn't even use the Meat Cleaver a single time. Bjor hits like a truck and basically soloed this guy. I barely had to lift a finger. Or catalyst. He also was kind enough to stick around to distract the Drake so I could run straight to the final boss. Of course, before doing that, I finished up Estrava's quest and picked up the Mausoleum key. I tested out Soul Ray against the Drake, then I realized that I probably shouldn't bother spending 40 minutes trying to kill it. So I decided to just move on and fulfill Estrava's final wish. This time, we're gonna use the Meat Cleaver for real. It felt good to have a weapon that is capable of doing yellow damage on his health bar for a change. Another thing I learned is that it's easier to just interrupt his AoE and cancel it, rather than wait it out and risk getting hit by its ridiculous range. Each time he tried to pull one of those, I got a free hit and healed any damage that I had taken in the fight. He tried to catch me in his soul-stealing grab, but I wasn't having it, and proceeded to flatten him for his transgression with the Meat Cleaver. No more playing around. Now, it's time for the real final boss. I'm gonna need some extra security, so I don't die to Truelant. He is pretty difficult, so it's time for the spell you've all been waiting for. Glad that's over with. Now to pick up the final boss weapon, the Soul Brant. And I lied, this isn't technically the final boss weapon. If we manage to impress Gundir's dad, he'll give us the other royal sword, the Demon Brant, which can be combined with the Soul Brant to make the ultimate weapon, the Northern Regalia. It's too bad this is a weapon that you can't actually use until NG+. Or is it? Thank you for watching this video. It was a short challenge, but not any less fun than anything else I've tried so far. I was surprised at how many boss weapons ended up not being used. But maybe those will be used in some other challenge, who knows? If you enjoy videos like this, there are more Souls challenges on my channel, and I am always happy to hear your requests and suggestions for future videos. So, I hope to see you next time.